part of the Oklahoma called cross timbers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It goes basically from Edmond. I don't know how far east it goes, but it's basically oaks and hickory, pecans, scrub, blackjack, you name it, and it kind of cuts across here. Now, we moved kind of on the other corner down there back in '90 when we bought this place, and this right here was just, well, all you saw from the other side of the pond was red. I mean, it had been years, I guess decades ago, they took out the trees, and then these put cotton, and you know, just got all the soil off it, completely gone. And there was just erosion, and basically I got with NRCS, and back in the 90s they had a program called Great Plains something, I can't remember, just one of their programs, and they were able to come in and they said, okay, we'll cost share with you to have it all disced up, tilled up, and put improved grass in there. And so that kind of helped hold the side together. It was never a top performer, hay met or anything like that, but at least it wasn't falling off the side of the earth anymore, you know. But I say all that to say that when we decided to do something with this in '09, we put these in here. I'll never forget the guy who used to cut the hay said, you're ruining perfectly good hay. For what? Have you lost your mind, Steve? But so we can walk over this way a little bit, and this is kind of where we started. And, these are mostly, let's see, we put them in 2009, so they would be coming up on their 8th growing season. And we didn't have irrigation at first. That wasn't for a couple of years later. And despite that, they seem to do really well in this clay type soil. Now we got Granny Smiths here, we got Fuji, apple. These are some of the new ones that Brian has, and I put them up here. Are you interested in fruit trees much at all? Just to kind of show some different varieties and so forth. One of the things folks ask about is whether it's for the fruit trees or the nut trees, is drip irrigation critical? For chestnuts, it was the first year or two, just to try to keep the water on them when we had the drought and so forth. But what I found is that really, drip irrigation is really not that important from May, June, even to early July. I mean, many of these varieties are drought tolerant, okay? The reason that I drip irrigate once I get the younger ones up and running is to improve the production of the fruit or the nuts. And that just helps them a little bit develop larger and so forth. So that's why we kick it in normally in July and August for the drip irrigation. This is the trees I was talking about. Flowers right here, now starting to come out. And they will be loaded with anywhere from grape size to quarter size fruit. And they also have these stay away from me thorns.
That whole thing is a thorn?
No, right there.
Oh.
Right here,
Oh.
yeah. But the deer have come to learn that if there's thorns, they stay away from it.
So how do you harvest them?
Just like you just did.
Carefully.
Well, carefully, and just pick them off the tree.
Yeah.
This is going to sound kind of crazy, but when the Asian community learned, and let me back up, jujubes are from China, North China is their home, Korea, and that area. When they learned that I had them, I got to get the ones I personally want off first, and then you'll come and they'll harvest the rest of them. It's just something that's kind of a high demand type of item. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to try because it was something different, something unique, you know. And this is probably, next to the chestnuts, this is probably the second most drought tolerant tree that's out here. You could do without irrigation on this. In fact, I learned last year that if you irrigate them too much, the production goes down for fruit. So it's a little bit unique, and we have 5 different varieties. Some of them look more like a small pear shape, where others would be more like a quarter size fruit. Also, we put in some plums. These are called late Santa Rosa plums, this particular variety. And I kind of joke about it when I heard that, because when I heard late, I thought that meant like late in the season. Well, they just now are having their first fruit. So to me, that's pretty late. I mean, 9 or 8, well, what, 8 years to get a fruit tree, off a fruit tree. But you can see that there's quite a few of them on here. If you look at the size of the trunk, that tells me that if you have a good wide girth on your tree, that it's doing well. I mean, it's one of a good health indicator. And so these trees seem to do well. We have peaches varieties and up here, and plums and other plums and so forth. Any particular questions?
Are you doing anything with persimmon?
Asian persimmon, yes, yes.
Ours are only about that big, but we got one last year.
Okay, okay. The tree that's right over here is one, to the left there. Actually, what's interesting is pointing this out, because our source for the persimmon actually uses American persimmon for the rootstock.
Oh, okay.
And the top died off of this one, that's where we get this, but that one right there is an Asian persimmon there.
Yeah, I saw the glossy leaves.
Yep, yep. And they have some fruit, and they look more like an orange almost.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait for a freeze. That's why we planted them.
Oh, no, yeah, you get them much earlier than that.
And they don't pucker you up.
No, they're nice and they're...
We had one, but it was every bit of that big.
Yep,
It's huge.
Yep. And they're very, almost like a gel. They're almost real squishy. It's really good. Okay, so I wanted to, if there's not any more questions, y'all are free to look around wherever you want. But so that kind of got us to the next step of, okay, we know the fruit will grow. Yeah, nice to have different things and different seasons and so forth, which is fun. But is there something that we can provide as a legacy to our family? Now, I gotta admit, I don't have 9 helpers. Brian is one blessed man. I've got a high school student for about 11 hours a week, most weeks of the year. So there's a lot to be done, and if it was going to happen, I hate to say it, but I was going to have to pretty much do it all. So that's why when we learned about the demand for chestnuts and the opportunity and so forth, I wanted to show you the difference between a bare root chestnut and one that we grow through our propagation step. And I'm not going to show you anything that you couldn't do yourself, okay? But I just want you to see the difference, because many times you can look and you can find things, and I've done the same thing. I bought, I think it was 500 bare root chestnuts from the West Virginia State Forestry Department. And they're all out over these next 12 rows. So you're probably thinking they look pretty good, don't they?
How old are these trees, Steve?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting to, is the seedlings are 5 years old, and the ones I propagated are 2 years old.
Okay.
Those are the seedlings that are 5 years old.
Oh my.
They're about 1.5 feet tall, and they're bare root. It's just that they have so much competition. They're not developed enough for the clay substrate. Bottom line, that's it. These we just planted in January, the ones with the plastic on them.
Huh.
I'm encouraged for a couple of reasons, but one reason is because we've had 3 terrible storms. And these are actually a little more developed than ones that we planted about 3 weeks ago, which would have come out of last year's crop. And if we get to them, we'll see them where the hail, the winds just took a lot of the top leaves, or just cut up the leaves in half. I mean, just really tore them up pretty bad. In fact, I was telling somebody that I think we had 110 trees that we had to straighten back up after the first 90-mile-an-hour wind storm that went through. Then the second one wasn't as strong a wind, but the ground was so saturated that I think we had 85 that laid down. So, you know, when you're dealing with Mother Nature, she reminds you who's in charge. But importantly, you just got to get them back up. Hopefully they'll be okay. And we're going to lose some of them, but that's kind of the nature of anything with nature, is you're going to have tough times with it. So this will be the 3rd growing season for these a lot of these
Do you
taller
do
ones.
anything for them other than plant them? Do you amend the soil? Do you fertilize,
I would-
compost, anything?
I would, personally, I don't.
Okay.
No. And I wanted to add a couple things to that, because one thing that I was taught, a couple things I was taught early that I think are real important, is they need to be able to grow in whatever soil is, whether it's 2 foot away, if you amend it, or touching it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought is that if we're using a 3-gallon pot of really developed root ball,
Mm-hmm.
then it should be able to get adapted to whatever the soil is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Quite frankly, I've tried it the other way, and I dug out about a 3 foot by 2 foot wide and 2 foot deep, and the majority of those didn't make it, because what would happen? A couple of things happen. You have clay all the way around it, right? So basically, you got a pot that says "fill me up with water" too, and they die of root rot.
Hmm.
So that's not good. The other question was about fertilizer.
Yeah, we have similar soil like this. We've had new little seedling starts, and the only way we've kick-started those and got them going is by composting and fertilizing.
Yep. I'd strongly recommend.
And once they get to a certain size, then they go, and they're stable, they're good, but it's that critical first 2 or 3 years. If you can get them past the hump, and then they go.
Yeah, these the bare root ones are the ones
Yeah.
that are about 2. Now there's a couple down there that are about 3 foot, but they're 4 years old. I mean, and let me back. I should have backed up for a second. When I planted these 10, 12 rows, you're supposed to plant chestnuts on a minimum of 30-foot spacing.
Mm-hmm.
I planted them on 4-foot spacing because I figured, okay, if I get 1 out of 8 to make it,
Yeah.
I'll be doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't do. The odds weren't good with us in this area.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it was really bad. But what the other thing is that this black plastic was around the seedlings,
Mhm.
so it was protecting them from weeds, you know, and also moderating the water somewhat, you know. So we did fertilize them all also. It's just it's a tough go when you got a bare root.
Yeah.
So anyhow, questions?
What about pests and stuff? Do you have to deal with that?
The only pests that I've found really are more on the fruit trees and more in the winter time.
Yeah.
Rabbits. They like to eat the bark right on the bottom. And if they get too far around, then it'll kill it. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No, in chestnuts there is a huge pest, and it's everything out there when the nuts are on the ground. I say that somewhat jokingly, but it's a daily harvest for chestnuts. If you leave them on the ground, 1 or 2 things bad is going to happen. One is a critter's going to get it, or, well, 3 bad things. Or the second thing is that it will start dehydrating. It's over 50% water when it first comes out of the burr and falls on the ground. So you don't want it to dry out, because the flavor, you start losing that real quick. And especially we're talking the end of September, and maybe the end of September up in Ohio, it's 55, 60 degrees, but not necessarily here. It could be 85, 95 degrees, you know. So you really need to collect them up every day. But the third and the most important thing is you need to get every nut up off the ground by the end of the season, harvest season. Otherwise, you get weevils that can develop. And once you get weevils in your orchard, end of story. Game out. So you can't, you can try to manage them, but you can't kill them all. So those are the reason that you try to get it up pretty quick.
Have you had any issues with wild hogs?
Not yet. I've been told they're about 2 miles away.
Yeah.
Just on the other side of
Oh,
Deep
they
Fork.
can smell them when they're really producing.
Oh, let me. Do you have hogs in your area or no?
Well, the guy I was telling you
Yeah.
about, he was starting to see them up on the
I
ridge.
think, I think those were domestic hogs that got loose from his neighbor. He was
Were
telling us he had a mature chestnut field,
Right.
and it wasn't large. It was probably maybe an acre or 2.
Okay.
A lot of big mature trees.
About 25 years old.
But his main predators on the chestnuts when they would fall would be white-tailed deer and turtles.
Yeah,
He said you could not believe. He said it's just
box
amazing.
turtles.
He would leave them on the ground. He couldn't harvest them all, and he said terrapins and turtles would come from everywhere to feed on those chestnuts.
He said the ground would just be moving.
Oh, you get squirrels at all. I mean, it's so funny. A squirrel.
Yeah.
The nut, if you've never seen a chestnut, is like 6 times the size of an acorn. I mean, it's a huge.
Yeah.
You got this big nut, and
Yeah.
the squirrel's trying to carry it in his
Yeah.
mouth. It's kind of a funny sight. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. The thing about hogs, though, about domestic hogs, is we're actually thinking about trying to grow hogs on some level. And in Europe, especially in France, that's basically how they got all those nuts up off the end of the year. Is they, of course, they don't have fencing over there; it's kind of all open. So they just go from orchard to orchard and clean it all up.
Yeah.
So
I'd like meat finished off with chestnuts,
grain,
right?
yeah, there you go. A tree grain, yep.
Yeah.
How do you finish off beef? With many times with grain.